There is an emergency fund lie that almost everyone believes. Most people have far too little in their emergency fund. FCA data shows that 10% of UK adults have no cash savings at all, while another 21% has less than £1,000 for an emergency. But saving as much as possible in your emergency fund isn't the answer. After 15 years working in finance, I'll show you how to use the 136 method to find your perfect number and build an emergency fund that fits your life. The emergency fund lie. So here it is. Here is the big lie, and more importantly, what you should do about it. If you spend 5 minutes looking at emergency fund advice from almost any personal finance creator, you'll encounter the same recommendation everywhere. Keep 3 to 6 months of expenses in cash. This is by far the most common recommendation, but it's another one of those things where there is just so much more to it than that. And treating this generic range, which is what it is, as a universal answer to absolutely everyone on earth is the big emergency fund lie. Here's what I mean. If someone asks you how much weight they should lift, you wouldn't give the same answer to the Mountain from Game of Thrones and me. That would be just absolute madness. Or imagine if someone asks you how much fuel they needed. Your first question would be, where are you going? Tesco or Thailand, Starbucks or Singapore? Emergency funds work in exactly the same way. Let me break it down. 2 people can earn identical salaries but need completely different amounts in their emergency fund. One might live in a dual income household with low fixed costs and an ironclad job. The other could be a single earner who is self-employed, has kids and is paying a big mortgage. Their incomes might be to the penny the same, but their circumstances are totally different, and therefore their emergency fund should be totally different. Your salary tells you how much is coming in, but that's only half the story. It doesn't tell you how expensive your life is, how secure your income is, how long it could take you to replace your job if you needed to. So how much do you actually need? I'm going to show you the main things you need to be considering and why an emergency fund that's too big is just as much of a problem. That's where the 136 method comes in. Now, I want to be absolutely clear. This is not another rule saying that everyone needs 6 months of expenses. Think of 1, 3, and 6 months as checkpoints. They're options. They're not some kind of money ladder that everyone has to climb to the top of. Instead, look at it like this. It's a practical way to build your emergency fund in stages that suits your life. Your circumstances, which we'll assess later on in the video, determine where you should stop on that ladder. I hope I haven't stretched this metaphor too far, but you get what I mean. So the first step is to calculate what 1 month of essential expenses, including your fixed costs, all the usual suspects, mortgage, rent, council tax, essential bills, utilities, groceries, transport, insurance, childcare, minimum debt repayments, the whole banana. For costs that change from month to month, look over roughly the last 6 months and calculate a realistic average. I would personally err on the side of caution rather than basing your calculation on what might be an unusually cheap month, for example. But let's say you do all of that, and let's imagine your essential expenses come to £2,500 a month. Your first checkpoint is 1 month of £2,500. That's your kind of initial layer of protection. It can absorb an essential car repair, a broken appliance, or an unexpected bill. The next checkpoint will be 3 months, so about £7,500. This adds some extra breathing room for you. But here's the thing, someone facing greater risks might continue beyond the first 2 rungs of the ladder and move towards 6 months at £15,000. That offers ironclad protection against losing your job for an extended period of time. But the important point is this, that 6 months is an option. It's one of 3 options, not an instruction. You start by establishing 1 month, and then once you get to 3 months, you can assess whether the risks in your life or how risky your lifestyle warrants going up to 6. You don't need to automatically keep accumulating cash because it feels safer. That's not how the 136 method works. Emergency funds versus sinking funds. People get these two mixed up all the time, and I think it is just banana-brained crazy. A sinking fund and an emergency fund do 2 completely different jobs in your finance, and so should be treated totally differently. So what is a sinking fund? A sinking fund is money you set aside each month for costs you know are coming, even if you don't know the exact date or to the penny what they're going to cost you, but you have a pretty good idea. Let's think about your car as an example. You know roughly how much it will cost to insure each year, and you know exactly when you will need to pay it. So that money should come from your sinking fund. The same kind of logic applies to servicing, MOTs, replacing tyres. These are costs that might not appear every month, but they're reasonably predictable. But if the arse falls completely out of your car on the motorway and that leaves you on the hard shoulder, then that clearly qualifies as something that should come out of your emergency fund. Because an emergency fund is different. A genuine emergency should meet 3 conditions. First, it must be unexpected. That means you couldn't reasonably have anticipated for it or planned for it. We don't have a crystal ball that we can gaze into for all the answers. Second, the expense must be necessary. Fixing a leaky roof before you need scuba gear to get a slice of toast from the kitchen is not the same as replacing a perfectly functioning kitchen because you don't like the colour of the cabinets or something. And the third thing, it must be urgent. It needs to be something that cannot safely or reasonably wait while you save for it. Or to put it less politely, it's something that's going to have to make your life pretty shit to go without. If an expense passes all 3 of these tests, you can use your emergency fund. That is exactly why it exists. Don't borrow at an expensive interest rate simply because you're emotionally attached to keeping your emergency fund balance untouched and as high as you can. That completely defeats the point of even having an emergency fund. Where to keep your emergency fund? This is just a very quick segment, but people make 2 catastrophic errors here. So once you have decided how much is going to sit in your emergency fund, where should you put that money? For most people, the simplest answer is a competitive, easy access savings account with the highest interest rate, but with few or absolutely no withdrawal limits. That is preferable. And this used to work, but it doesn't so much anymore. The purpose of your emergency fund is not to generate the highest possible return. That normally rules out an investing account where the stock market can go up and down, and you might have to withdraw money exactly when you don't need it. So that's out straight away. A cash ISA could also be suitable because the interest is tax-free. But remember that money paid into a cash ISA will use part of your overall £20,000 a year ISA allowance. And this is really what I mean when I say this used to work. When interest rates were absolutely peanuts and you needed stacks and stacks of cash to worry about getting anywhere near having to pay tax on your savings interest, then that was fine. But as interest rates have been hiked pretty aggressively, it's something that more and more people need to consider. And this is why. Basic rate taxpayers can get up to £1,000 of saving interest without paying tax. Higher rate taxpayers get £500 and additional rate taxpayers get no personal savings allowance at all. So the larger your emergency fund and the higher the interest rate, the more you need to think about taxes. We covered it in this video here, which I'll make sure to link at the end. And finally, you should check that your money is protected by the Financial Services Compensation Scheme. Since December 2025, eligible deposits have been protected up to £120,000 per person per authorised banking licence. This basically just means that your emergency fund is going to be backstopped by the government. But for the most part, it usually makes sense to keep it in a separate account from your current account. If the money sits beside the cash that you're using for food, bills, and all of your goings out, it's much easier to treat it as available spending money, the cost of keeping too much cash. Now, at this point, given everything we've talked about, you might think that common sense dictates you should just hold more in your emergency fund, that will solve all of your problems, right? Why worry about a new engine in your car when you could just buy a new car? But the truth is, that additional security comes at a cost, and potentially an even greater cost. But there is a solution to this predicament. Imagine you go through the process we'll go through in a second, and you need, say, a £15,000 emergency fund, but you decide to hold £25,000 in your emergency fund just in case. If that additional £10,000 earned an average of, say, 2% in savings over 20 years, it would grow to approximately £14,900. But if you invested it and got an average annual return of 10%, it would grow to around £67,300. That is a difference of approximately £52,400. And that is a problem. The opportunity cost could have been even greater if you're holding on to too much cash and that meant underfunding your pension. Don't forget, you'll get tax relief on pension contributions and employer matching, so making sure you're taking advantage of those over building an excessively large emergency fund is just so important. Don't get these two things mixed up. The other thing you need to bear in mind is that unused ISA allowances, which we were just talking about, will disappear at the end of the tax year. If you don't use it, then you lose it. You can't save twice as much next year simply because you used all of your allowance this year to build an excessively large emergency fund. But anyway, I digress. The main point here is that repeatedly prioritising holding masses of cash in an emergency fund could leave you actually less protected from future tax or benefiting from compound growth, potentially underfunding your own retirement. But there is a solution. There are also ways to improve your financial resilience without holding every possible expense in cash. This is the solution to that predicament. And the answer is insurance. Insurance can allow you to transfer certain risks to an insurer for a premium, obviously. Think home insurance, income protection, critical illness cover, and so on. So you can potentially reduce your exposure to large costs without needing to hold stacks and stacks of cash in reserve. Clearly, this doesn't replace your emergency fund, but it is part of a bigger money plan. I just also want to point out, you can lower the amount that you need in your emergency fund by reducing your fixed expenses. Most regular viewers of this channel will know that I don't think too highly of the frugality movement for a whole host of reasons, but that's another video for another day. But the Make Your Own Coffee Brigade, on this one, they've got a point. I've got to give it to them. If you can cut your essential spending every month, then the need for you to hold an ever-increasing cash pile in your emergency fund decreases, and decreases pretty dramatically. But now I want to get to the main event of the video, which is how much do you actually need? And this brings us back to the emergency fund lie that we started the video with. The usual advice says keep anywhere between 3 and 6 months of expenses in cash in an emergency fund. But where you sit in that range depends on two things. The first is how risky your own personal circumstances are, how exposed your finances potentially are. But the second is how much financial risk you are personally willing to accept. These are not the same thing. Your personal circumstances are exactly that. They're personal. But your risk tolerance describes how comfortable you are living with those risks. And that leads us to this, which I'll call the emergency fund risk matrix. That sounds like it could be in a textbook or something. So let's start with your circumstances. Things like, how many incomes does your household have? A dual income household where both people earn about the same will generally have more protection than a household relying on one person who earns twice as much. Then consider how those incomes are earned. Someone who's permanently employed may be less risky than someone who is self-employed. Now look at your fixed expenses. How much of your take-home income is already committed to your fixed expenses that will not change? Mortgage, rent, council tax, childcare, insurance, debt repayments, those sorts of things. And now we come to the second axis, your tolerance for risk. Again, imagine two households with identical finances. One might be comfortable holding 3 months because they're willing to reduce their spending quickly. They accept that some uncertainty and some risk in the short term is worth it when it comes to prioritizing their long-term investment growth. They are taking more risk now so that they can invest more into the future, and I think that's a kind of reasonable trade-off. The other household might struggle to sleep without, say, 9 months sitting in safety in a cash account. And I just want to say, neither household is necessarily behaving irrationally because, as we mentioned, personal finance is exactly that. It's personal. So when we bring all this together, it gives us 4 possibilities. If your circumstances are relatively secure and you're comfortable accepting a bit more uncertainty, you may sit closer to, say, a month in your emergency fund, maybe up to 3 if you really wanted to push it a bit. Perhaps you have 2 genuinely independent incomes in your household. You make about the same as each other, so income in the house isn't concentrated on one person. You have low fixed expenses. You get strong employee benefits. You have no kids to worry about. If your circumstances are secure, but you have a lower tolerance for risk, then something closer to 6 months may help you sleep better, even if the mathematical case for holding that extra cash is kind of weak. If your circumstances are riskier, but you're comfortable accepting that risk, you're comfortable accepting that uncertainty, you may sit on around the 6-month mark, maybe pushing it to 9 months if you feel as though you need it. You recognize that puts you in additional danger, but you're willing to balance that against the cost of keeping money into your long-term investment accounts. And if your circumstances are riskier still and you strongly value security, 9 to 12 months may be more up your street. This could be a self-employed sole earner supporting children, carrying high fixed expenses, working in an industry where work is sporadic. All those sorts of things might put you in the high risk category. And at the end of the day, your position on this matrix will change. Moving home, getting married, having children, becoming self-employed, taking on a bigger mortgage, getting closer to retirement, all of these are things that should trigger you to relook at this process. Your emergency fund should evolve along your own personal life. We have 3 videos on screen. We have Labour's tax rises revealed, why the best 10 years to build wealth aren't your 20s, and why you should not rely on the state pension. You've been watching Bond Money Talk. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. It really helps the channel. Thanks for watching.